Hi, this is Robert Shear with another edition of Sheer Intelligence, and where the intelligence comes from my guest. In this case, Rob Edwards, who's got a 30-year or more career being very successful in Hollywood, mass media. Actually, these days you're famous for once again, for The Princess and the Frog because Disney changed its exhibits. And I know because my son took my grandchild and they were talking about it before I even knew we were doing this. And we have the reason we're here is that you did a what you call a graphic novel, but it looks to me like a comic book. Yeah, there it goes. And and uh, and I love the idea that you've been able to use mass media to I don't want to make it sound boring, but actually to educate people. Okay, and including comic books. I remember as a kid growing up in the Bronx, we didn't have much literature around, but we had classic comics, as I recall, they were called. And if you were lazy or you didn't have access to the book that they were going to be discussing, you could get the classic comics. It did a pretty good job of it. And it seems to me, looking at your work, I'm not going to give all the credits here, but you've been on very prominent things, the Prince of Bel Air, and also you can mention anything you want. But you've been able to use not exploit, but effectively use mass media to deal with very serious topics that otherwise people don't encounter. All right. So I guess that's my opening question. This project, Defiant, and I'm not going to let you tell the story, but it's a very important story that I have to admit, I thought I knew a lot about all this stuff, had never heard the story before,
Yeah,
and it's a story of Robert Smalls, and it's a picture of slavery and the experience of slavery uh, that is very different and complex, and it's also a successful story of beating the system by committing what would have been considered a serious crime, grabbing a boat that he had worked on and with seven other people and their families, and escaping to the north in the midst of the Civil War from the Confederacy. And but it doesn't end tragically. It ends with his becoming a representative to the Congress and being celebrated and appearing all over the country as an inspirational speaker with the Barnum Circus. So why don't you? I'm probably butchering this story.
no,
Why
no,
don't you
no. This is
tell me
great.
why this project and how do people get it now? And I think it's really important because it breaks the stereotypes.
Yeah,
This guy clearly, and first of all, it mocks the whole idea of race as a definer. It's obviously an absurd construction, and I'm going to steal the story if I tell it, but this guy was a slave under different improbable circumstances, and then he just seized the day and did something, But go ahead, tell it.
yeah. Well, his mother. I mean, it's interesting when you say improbable circumstances. His mother, from the age of 9, had been raising the McKee family, his slave owner's family, and so she had raised generations of the family, and she actually lived in the backyard of the family's estate, and so. McKee, this guy Henry McKee, has a daughter 3 months before 3 months before Robert Smalls was born. And as guys who have daughters, and here's this boy out in the backyard, my assumption is he played with Robert whenever he got a chance. So Robert learned how to sail, he learned how to hunt, he learned all kinds of things from the McKee family. In fact, he was a very good dresser, probably because he was wearing hand me down clothes from the house itself. So he was, yeah, it was very unusual as a slave. McKee owned 900 slaves and had this one in the backyard. And so from a very young age, he was kind of what I think was kind of raised as an affluent white kid. In right there in Buford, in the South, in this wonderful house. So when he's 23 years old, after being kind of what's called a quasi slave, where he worked at a hotel, he had a business selling tobacco, small amounts of tobacco to people who didn't want to carry around a large bag. He did the same thing with candy. all to try to buy his own freedom, which took him 10 years to do. He finally got there and then had to, was going to try to do the same thing with his wife. And his wife's price was $800. His price was $100. So he was never going to be able to pay that off. So one night, he's afraid that that his wife's slave master is going to discover the child that they've just had. They've just had a boy, and boys go for a lot of money in the slave market. And he's afraid that the boy is going to be taken and sold away, and his family will be destroyed. So one night he's working on this ship that ferries weapons for the Confederacy from one place to another. At 3 a.m., he and the black crew wait for the white crew members to leave. They steal the boat. They take it past 5 military checkpoints, dressed as the captain, copying the captain's mannerisms, all the secret signals, to get from place to place, surrenders the boat to the Union Army. And then I think his story starts because at that point he's free. The journey itself.
There were seven, and their families too, right?
His families, he meets the families in the in Charleston Bay, and they take them on. So there is this manifest of who. What's interesting, I think, in story slave narratives is that they didn't keep their own notes. They were all illiterate, and so there was no my darling Clementine, I am fighting in the war for whatever. You don't get all that kind of stuff. What you get are just manifests and newspaper articles and sometimes census data and stuff like that. So we have the manifest of the crew that was on the ship, including the 3 white crew members. And then we have one person missing on one end that doesn't show up when they surrender themselves to the Union Army. And then a new person shows up. So I take that to mean, okay, well, there was one guy they didn't trust. So they kind of got him out of the picture. And then one guy, probably the fisherman that escorted the families to the ship, they probably took him on, or he had himself taken on. And then when he made it to freedom on the Union side, it all worked out for him. So this guy, from that point, most stories would end. Boy, he's free. Oh, yay, whatever. One, take one for the team. He starts a railroad to help people, black people especially, move goods from one place to another because white, companies were very, did not want that to happen, didn't let it happen. He started it. He also started a newspaper because, of course, at that time, the most important information to get around was, where is my husband? Have you seen my wife? Have you seen my child? He answers to this name. He's about this tall. And, of course, the white paper.
Let me interrupt because I thought
Sure.
he also went into the Union Army and fought in the Civil War. Is that not the case?
17 battles he fought for the Union
Oh,
Army.
yeah.
And,
And because again, I just for people who have, I've been reading a lot about it now,
oh, great.
catching up, and the fact is, this is supposed to have been his example was supposed to be influential in Lincoln's changing his position on blacks being soldiers in the Union Army, right? So why don't we just
Absolutely.
really it's a really, he ended up, among other things, appearing. He's a great lecturer. He gives speeches and everything, inspirational speeches, and for P.T. Barnum and so forth. But the fact is, it's a very important story. It's not just a novelty. It's an example of the irrational. Of course, we don't need the immorality of slavery, but the profound irrationality of it, which maybe his owner was trying to demonstrate. Although I don't understand why his owner didn't just free him if he's developed this personal relationship. But nonetheless, clearly, this guy is the smartest guy in town. He can do anything. He creates businesses, and he learns to. He becomes literate, I gather, in his 20s. But actually, when he goes into the army, he's effective in the Union Army, right? As
Yes.
were the others. So why don't we stretch this out? We got a half hour, and to get some of my listeners to go pick up a comic book, we could talk about that. It might
Okay.
not be so easy. So why don't you give us a lot of this texture?
Excellent. Well, yeah, you mentioned Lincoln. Yeah, he meets with Lincoln and Stevenson right after he is free. DuPont is actually the in charge of the base, and takes him in and says, you probably meet this guy. He meets with the two of them, like I say, a week after he is free, and 2 weeks after that, Lincoln allows black people into the Union Army. So I find a causal link there. The conversation that they had was basically, the argument against had been, well, they don't have the courage, they don't have the intelligence, they, are not tactical, and that, and this in one night, Robert Smalls disproved all of that because he outsmarted the entire, Confederate Navy, and the planning that they went through. Holy cow! To gather the families at the dock, they launched at 3 a.m. to not arouse suspicion. They surrendered themselves at 6, which was, by my count, right before sunrise. So that because he knew that he had to kind of disguise himself as a captain and get through all of this, that could only happen at night. So there was that. When to meet the families, when to tell the families that that they were going to do this. All of those things he had to plan. They actually lined the ship with gunpowder because they knew if anything went wrong, it was just not it was not going to be good for them. They'd known what had happened at the Haitian Rebellion. People were dragged through the streets, so they figured that, okay, if anything goes wrong, they're just going to light the ship on fire and call it a day. So all of this, Lincoln hears this and says, "Well, we have misjudged you all this time," and he turns around and allows this to happen. As you'd also mentioned, Robert Smalls fought in 17 naval missions for the Union successfully, and is given his title as captain when the during the Battle of Successionville, where they're in this battle. It's a lost battle for the Union, and the one ship that gets out is the Planter, and it's just because the white captain had basically abdicated. He just ran down below decks and told him to surrender the ship. And Robert Smalls said, well, if we do, I am very famous and they are very famous. Things are not going to go well. And he found a way to get out of the battle and get out of the ship, and lead the crew to safety because he was the captain in that time. They had no choice but to give him the title, so he is Captain Robert Smalls. Yeah, fun stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and again, uh, it's an odd story because again, you haven't answered the question why didn't
Oh,
this. He was one of the richest men in South Carolina, right? The McKee family. Why didn't he just free? And it's a question you could ask about Jefferson or Washington or so forth. Why didn't they free people? But
yep,
why is this guy running around all this time trying to buy his freedom? Um,
man, it's such a fascinating question because the like I say, McKee's had 900 slaves. And this, Robert was born. We don't know who his father was. A lot of people think it was Henry McKee, but DNA tests have kind of disproven that. Um, he just basically was this kid who grew up in the backyard. He could have easily let him free. My theory is, because I'm trying to tell a new type of slave narrative. It's always the same kind of like, whips and chains stuff. And I want to tell an inspirational one. And I think part of the story here is that people are generally good in a general sense. It's the institution of slavery that enabled people, emboldened people to be super cruel at times like this. And so you figure that, yeah, McKee didn't need $100. You know, he had all of these slaves. He had a huge empire. He was one of, like you said, he's one of the richest people in Beaufort, South Carolina. Robert comes and asks him for his freedom. At the time, some people use the excuse that the penalties for freeing a slave were so tremendous that it discouraged people from doing it. But again, I think he could have easily, paid that off. So what I think is just like, I don't know. I just think that he was probably a kind-hearted man who used this terrible, terrible system to his advantage when the time came. So it's one of those questions you'd actually have to ask Henry McKee. But I do think it's it does boggle the mind as to why a person who was so close to this kid would not give him the one thing that he had asked for, which is his freedom.
Well, it goes to the whole question of mindless brutality and
Yes.
categorization. That, I mean, I know I spent some time in the South, well, beginning, I think it was 1960, and did some civil rights things. And you'd always find these Southerners that would tell you, oh, we are much closer to black people here than you are North, and we're part of the same community. And these were then, well, it was around Jimmy Carter and people becoming, more enlightened at that time and so forth. And, and yet, you know, this was true in Germany with the Jews, for God's sake. I mean, the Jewish people were better received in Germany than they were in maybe the rest of Europe. And yet, the German people then, when they built with the crematoriums, they didn't speak up and they didn't object, even though, the situation had been better. And so, in following the story that you're recounting, and we should talk a little bit about how people get it and get involved in it and, can learn about it. But it seemed to me, again, it's like with Jefferson and Washington. I mean, Jefferson had a love affair or whatever it was, exploitive or whatever,
Yes.
with a black woman.
Sally
So
Hemings.
the whole idea is that when does somebody lose their humanity in the eyes of others, and when do they become human again? And the convenience of defining somebody as subhuman so you can exploit them, rape them, kill them, or do anything. And yet, once the law changes, or they have some political power, or they can punish you, or so forth. Oh, well, then we suddenly discover they are human, but they're exceptional. The
Yeah.
great thing about your story is this fellow who could have passed in a way. He could have made his own deal, his own arrangements, and so forth. And he showed later in life, we should talk about it. He was a famous figure and popular and could get elected and so forth.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, he didn't feel alienated from those other people on the boat, the other black people and their families.
Right.
And he actually was an advocate for public schools and also, so he didn't become the exceptional to the rule, right? He said, no, I am just like these other people, but for the exception that I was in the backyard rather than the field, so
Yes.
forth. So, I always promise I'm not going to talk so much, so I'm going to shut up from here on in and just
No, no,
tell
no.
us where the project is now, how people get it, how is it doing, so they can explore this for themselves, because
Oh,
it's an incredible story.
oh, thanks, thanks. Well, I'll hit. There are three things I want to jump in with. It. One is, and maybe I'll wait till later. But change. You were talking about how one of the interesting things that I find about Reconstruction itself was that it was an attempt. It was, America trying to apologize for slavery, and that all of a sudden people became doctors and lawyers and ran stores and there was millions and stuff like that. And you take a snapshot of that period. Um, through Jim Crow and through the passing of the 14th Amendment, and then the death of Lincoln and that kind of thing. And then you flash forward to the 20s when everything starts getting burned down, right? When the Tulsa riots and the Wall Street bombing and stuff like that start to happen. But that it was this wonderful time when I say the boot of racism. America was trying to take the boot of racism off of the neck of Black America, and which is why I think it's really worth looking into, and and seeing how when we kind of give way to our better angels, what can happen when we actually do try. And it took a lot, troops in the streets, all kinds of stuff. The other part about a change that you had mentioned is you'd like to think that we change, that there is that day when everybody says, oh, it's okay now, we're fine, we've apologized, and things are great. But we're still debating the 14th Amendment. We're still kind of books like this are in danger in some states. It's currently, weirdly, as we speak, it's been embargoed. As we're trying to get books into the hands of people. So it's an interesting.
Your specific.
It's been embargoed. So and who knows
Tell
what's
me,
going on? Somebody will dig into it and figure it out. But it rarely happens, and it happened to our book. So
I
as we
don't.
were importing it, it's stuck at the dock right now,
Oh,
and they're charging us to for them to store it. So I think there's something amiss, but nicer people don't think so. So I,
wait a
I
minute.
will.
Wait a minute. I didn't know any of this.
Yeah.
We're
What?
talking about
Oh, go ahead.
the first issue of a series of comics.
Yes,
I mean,
this is the
yeah.
first of three. This one takes us through the heist itself. The second one, I'm gonna be addressing the 17 military battles, the meeting with Lincoln. He at Because of the amount of money he made on the heist, he became wealthy. As you mentioned, he did speeches for P.T. Barnum, and he was able to buy the house that he was enslaved in. The McKees had to abandon their house when the troops came through, and so he bought the house and continued to live there for the rest of his time. At one point, the mistress of the house, the slave owner's wife, came back. She had Alzheimer's, and this was the only house she knew. Smalls, in his infinite capacity for grace, allowed her to live out the rest of her life in the master bedroom of the house. And so that to me is like he's not only a hero in courage and intelligence. He's got the biggest heart in the world.
So wait a
Um,
minute. Take the listener in there. So this is the white, privileged white woman
yep,
who had 900 people enslaved, supporting her lifestyle,
yep,
and then and people should understand Reconstruction was a very stormy period when you say the former slave owner fled the house. I mean, this was a time of turbulence and so forth. And yet, with her Alzheimer's, she's unaware of things and she needs the familiarity of the old house. He has bought the house. You
yes,
know, this is kind of the fantasy Donald Trump imagines about himself, except he's not quite as self made
right,
uh, as Smalls is. But so he has this dream come true. He's got the mansion, and then he brings her in. It is the most improbable tale, if you think about it. And he is actually caring for her,
yes, yes,
right?
yes. They
Yes.
are. She's in the master bedroom. They're feeding her. The whole thing. She lives out the rest of her days in that house. And after everything that you've done to
When are
earn,
you going to make this into a movie and not just I shouldn't say just a graphic novel. I know it's
just
a
a book.
highly respected form, but
Yes,
you're a movie person, right? So
I am.
is
Yeah,
it going
so
to be?
that is in the works. That part of it is in the works. Of the things in the front, the credits. Most recently this year, I wrote Captain America: Brave New World for Marvel. I wrote a movie called King of Kings that is doing really well. So I really enjoy writing kind of epic, larger than life characters, and so we'll get a chance to do that here. I was hoping to have an announcement to make on your show, but it may happen later this week. We're bringing a director in. We're going to go into development, and hopefully, very soon after that, we'll have a star attached, or maybe several stars attached, and we'll be going out. It looks like this is the kind. What's fun about this? You tell these stories. I'm new to the independent world, but what's fun about it now is that a lot of people who have a lot of money and have previously been in politics and doing other things are very interested in helping us make this as a movie. And they can find me directly if they want at I am Rob Edwards on Instagram. But we are kind of building a big boat. Legion M started this thing, and they're captaining the ship as it were, and yeah, so we are. It looks like it's going to happen, and it seems like the kind of movie that a lot of people want to help make. So that is going really well.
Well,
Um,
but it's also the kind of movie that a lot of people don't want to have made. I mean,
exactly. All
you
the
know,
more reason, right? All the more reason to fight back on that.
I'm not doubting that, but I mean, let's not. I mean, you've been very successful, and you've been successful having a positive impact. I'm not trying to damn this thing, but the fact of the matter is, you have been very successful,
Yeah.
and you've chosen to do this. And I want to circle back to why is it embargoed, because that sounds pretty serious. I mean, you mean it was printed elsewhere, and now you can't get it in the country or something?
Right. Yeah.
Well, hopefully we'll do another show when we find out, unless it's good news,
Like to
what
get to the
happened.
bottom. I would like to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
It could be that there's, it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, but who knows? Who knows what exactly is going on?
Okay.
But you're right. Stories like this, people are trying very hard to not tell stories like this,
Right. They
and
come
which
put
is one
on.
of the big reasons why it's not a book, it's a graphic novel. It's meant to be kind of left on your kid's bed or slipped under doors, or graphic novels have more of a sticky nature to them, so kids will just start hopefully devouring them. You can get it in digital form, so so if you're looking around for it, that's a good way to kind of get it out there. I think we'll be in schools soon, so that'll be great. At the moment, you can get it on Amazon. We were the number one best-selling graphic novel, historical graphic novel, when we debuted. It's still there. Barnes and Noble just made a big order, which is great. And I think if you don't see it in stores, ask for it, because the stores will carry it, and it's been selling out everywhere it
Okay.
goes.
So then maybe I misunderstood. When you said it's embargoed, that's what, the more
And we
recent?
we ordered we have I believe it's 8,000 copies that have gone out, and those sold out right away. That's printing, and then we ordered an additional 20,000 copies, and so those are on back order, and we're trying to get those into the hands of people, but those books have been embargoed. So people who have ordered them, paid for them, are waiting now for the embargo to be lifted so they can get their books.
Yeah. I mean,
And then
the
once that's
irony
over,
is that this otherwise very innocent project, trying to get history,
inspiring kids.
yeah, inspiring and so forth, and even makes some white people who were, slave owners look like they have a soul and a conscience and so forth.
Exactly.
So and yet it's exactly the sort of thing that's under attack right now. Under attack. Why are you troubling us with these images of a fraught history? And it's a very good illustration, because this is a win-win story, right? There are lots of heroic black people in this story, but there are lots of well-intentioned white people, including the president of the United States at
Yes.
that time,
Yes.
who were inspired by this tale, and yet that's just the sort of history that's being drummed out of the schools now. I'm saying this because I'm doing double duty here. I actually happen to teach at the Annenberg School at USC in
Yes.
communication and journalism, and so
I also teach screenwriting at SC,
oh well, there you go. You come over
and
and
we both went to Syracuse. So go Orange.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
When did you go to Syracuse?
85. I
Oh,
was.
so you looked me up and you saw I was at Syracuse?
Oh yeah.
Oh, oh,
You got to know. You got to know who went to Syracuse. That's great.
yeah. Well, I was there when they had the best, right? Brown. I mean, the best football team.
Oh,
Went down
absolutely.
the lift to that. Yeah, miserable place otherwise. I thought.
Yeah. Too much snow.
But aside from that, seriously, I mean, this is an incredible example. First of all, just that you use different forms, and and you treat it in a very respectful way. What does the comic book and why does it reach people, and the graphic novel, sorry, and you also planned it out with these three books, luring people in to the story, and what you're intending to do here, right? So it's a
Yes.
really great case study, but it's also the very kind of project that's now under attack. Why are you bringing up these old issues, and why well, because this tells us who we are, and
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, my problem is that, like, I mean, much like you, this. This story came to me as a surprise. It was a friend of mine from high school who works with Legion M, had brought this story to me. And I was a bit embarrassed that I had never heard of Robert Smalls. And as he was talking, I'm Wikipediaing it on the other screen. And when I heard the story, I got a little angry because why don't I know this story? The way Black history is often taught in schools, and I went to a boarding school. I was the same school Mitt Romney went to, um, and uh, uh, and the way it's taught is, hey, it's February. Martin Luther King had a dream, and Rosa Parks and Beyonce. End of story. Okay, let's get back to real American history, and that's the way it's kind of taught. We don't get into these wonderful granular stories about Reconstruction and the other people who served in Congress during that time. There were many, and they were all really really interesting. So this is a small kind of pebble in the ocean of Black history. I'm hoping that this finds a new way of telling these kinds of stories that is not necessarily triggering to people. I have a friend who's like 70-year-old British guy who says he read it and he said, "I'm inspired by this. Am I supposed to be inspired by this?" And I said, "Well, yeah. It's a Horatio Alger story. If you can start from a slave and get to the point where you are, in the third volume, he runs for Congress 5 times and wins against Jim Crow and all kinds of things going on. They try to frame him, for bribery, and he rather than give up his seat and let the case go away, he fought it, won, and went back to Congress. So he's just an amazing, amazing guy. And this story, no matter who you are, is a very American story, and it's a very inspiring story, and hopefully it will help to rewrite the narrative of just how we can tell these stories without completely demoralizing white America. We can tell our history without saying like, oh yeah, you guys were really mean to us for a long time.
Well, it is the history also, obviously, of white America. And
Yep.
I mean, you find it even with a guy like Jimmy Carter, who I got to know his story real well and interviewed him and all that.
Right.
And his father was a rigid segregationist, but there were contradictions even in the South. Kids played, white and black kids played together until the magic age, whether it was 9 or 8 or something. Suddenly, no, you don't do that. No, they're different.
Yeah.
And so segregation was a bewilderingly complex experience, and you see it even with somebody I had admired very much in life, Jefferson. How could he do this? How could he basically exploit a woman that he claimed to love? Or I,
Right.
I assume did. And the ability of people to accept these extreme contradictions as clearly when he's treating Robert Smalls as the owner as a full human being playing ball with him, and I may be disappointed because he doesn't have a son; he has a daughter. But the fact of the matter is, yet he doesn't take that next step of giving him his freedom.
Yeah.
You know,
No, it's
and,
it's it's
and
insane because you think about, especially with Jefferson, you think about Sally Hemings could not say no. She
yeah,
did not
he was
have
afraid.
the she
He
did
was
not have the agency to say no to any of it. So
right.
as he writes floweringly about her and how much there was this great love affair, she could not say no. So where was the consent? And that with stories like this, yes, he was, Henry McKee could have been the greatest guy in the world. He could be Santa Claus. But when Robert Smalls asked for his freedom, Henry McKee said, "No, here's a price." And so it is that, what to me, like I say, the slavery itself, the institution of slavery, is the bad guy in this story, and I believe it is the bad guy in American history. That even now, as we're so easily motivated by a chance to dehumanize another culture. Whether it's at the border or whatever. Like I say, we're still debating the 14th Amendment. The right to citizenship, and which was once again an apology for slavery. Like, okay, let's nationalize all the slaves, and then let's take it away when when birthright citizenship becomes an issue in 2025. We are still there. So as we learn our history, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. It absolutely rhymes, as you were talking about with Germany, and and there you can see the parallels of how we treat people once we are allowed to dehumanize them. And that's something that hopefully some kid will see the history and say, okay, it stops today.
Yeah, you're right. It applies right now to the whole situation of undocumented people, and even people who are fully citizens and documented are being treated as the other. And you're questioning birthright citizenship. You see, I want to get you into too many controversies here, but you see it in Israel and Palestine. I mean, I was there at the time of the Six-Day War, and then you had the Labor government in power, and there was at least the thought, no, we have Arabs people who are Palestinians living in Israel, and they gave blood to the war effort and everything else. Well, now they've been dehumanized, and you wonder, how did this happen? How did millions of people suddenly stop being human beings who used to, serve you food or prepare or work in your, come over and work on your side of the border or live as citizens in your own country, after all, legal Palestinians. So I think I promised we wouldn't go on too long,
Sorry.
but I just think it's an incredibly powerful message because of its complexity, and the complexity is it's like W.E.B. Du Bois could go to Harvard and could
Yes.
become the exception, and then people say, well, everybody else could do it. No, they couldn't. This Smalls was raised really an accidental experience,
Yes.
but he showed with the same DNA, the same makeup, just given that chance, oh no, here, I'll play ball with you and I'm not going to be rated and I'll teach you certain things, because he got quite a bit of his confidence from
Oh
the
yeah.
slave owner. And
His
it's interesting,
elocution, all of that. Yes.
in your use of the comic, I was going to say one thing about it. I'm not an expert on comics or anything, but his owner at times looks as sinister as a comic figure as the bad guys because
That's
he's white and he has, I guess, a beard,
Yep.
and you know, and so he had to be reminded. And he also, I don't know how he passed so well, but he was successful working in the port, and I guess New
Mhm.
Orleans was open enough at that time, even though it's the Civil War, where he could occupy a job on a ship, not as the
Yes.
captain, but step in for the captain or
Yeah,
something.
exactly. As a
Yeah,
pilot.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so again, okay, we're going to wrap this up. But the power of this work, can you show us the copy or where people
Oh,
get
now
it? Or
this is the. Let me get the other one. Yeah, this is the limited edition that we took to Comic Con. It's actually Shaft, and we did it as Robert Smalls. It's the Shaft poster that we redid, and then this is the yes, this is the comic book. When you see this cover, it is also the cover for the graphic novel. But you can get them in the shorter editions, and then it's also the graphic novel. I would get the hardcover because it is a great coffee table book. It's exceptional artwork on the cover by this guy Nicholas Draper Ivy, who does this comic book called Static Shock. The interiors were Sean Damian Hill, who also does Black Panther, and Ray Anthony Height does a bunch of the interior covers. He's also from Black Panther. The team at Stranger Comics, an independent black owned comic book publisher. They did the really all the work as far as putting the book itself together. It's an amazing piece of art, and I think every page you turn to is truly glorious. I'll just flip at random to some of these. It's just how beautiful is that? This is just it's just gorgeous. So even as something that you would just kind of page through and look at the artwork, it's enjoyable in that way. Like I say, so much of my career working with Disney and working at Marvel and a lot of the other projects is make something that is entertaining and then has some meaning to it. So you can just read it and go like, "Oh, I hope he escapes," and you can read it and say, "Wow, I've learned a lot about this period of American history. I want to learn more." And soon there will be volumes 2 and 3 for you to do that.
Just one last point, I guess by way of an editorial, I can't resist. It also goes to the question of objectifying people,
Yep.
because here is clearly someone who showed, wait a minute, let me get my freedom and I'll show you what I can do and so forth. And you now have a situation where, symbolic of the whole South is Washington, D.C. And
Yes.
here is a community which should have had statehood, should have had black leadership given its
Yeah.
population and so forth. And that very idea of Washington, D.C. being attacked. Why? Because black people have power
Yes.
there, and and
Yes.
and yeah, and so listen, my hats off to you because you've been able to deal with success and power in the entertainment industry. Something I know at the USC we claim exists and celebrate, and so it's nice to have a living example of that. And it's nice also, not nice, it's important that you would take a form like the okay, I keep blocking it, the graphic novel. Is that what it is? The
Yes.
graphic novel, or
It's
the
both.
comic,
It's both. Yes.
the comic, and the
Yeah,
successor.
I think like I'm a comic book guy, so I like thinking of it as a large comic book. Graphic novel puts me in this other category of like novelist, but I think of it as a series of comic books. In the vein of the stuff that we grew up with, where you would, absolutely, you page through these things and kind of that was the way a lot of us learned history was through historical comic books.
And which boarding school did you go to? With what you said?
Cranbrook, Cranbrook in Michigan.
Oh my God,
Yes,
Cranbrook.
Cranbrook.
Oh, yes, that's one of the more elite
Go
privileged.
Cranes. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
I
I,
I, I spent
I am.
I
I very much relate to Robert
had me come
Smalls.
there. They had me come there, and I stayed there for a week and spoke there once. So it's quite
Oh,
a memory.
great.
They actually have high table like in Oxford or so forth. The whole
Yep.
ritual. Yes. All right. On that note, you survived it, and you've gone on to have a great life. And so,
Survived Cranbrook.
yeah, all
Cranbrook in
the
Syracuse.
people put this together. Most important, Joshua Shear, who insisted I do this. I know we set it up before. I ended up in the hospital, couldn't do it. We stuck with it. I'm glad we did. And I want to thank Diego Ramos for writing the intro, Max Jones for putting it up on video, and the JKW Foundation for giving us support for doing this, and Integrity Media in Chicago really helping us out a lot here. So we'll see you next week with another edition of Sheer Intelligence.
Thank you for
So
having me.